Hello and welcome back to Flying Solo. This is me, Caleb, and I'm here today to record the last in my three-part series covering all the books that I went through during 2024. Now, I believe on my last episode I left off with the second in the Timothy Zahn Thrawn Trilogy, and the next book in my lineup is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, published in 1979, written by Douglas Adams. Now, I had not had much experience with Douglas Adams prior to this book, except for his work script editing for Doctor Who during season 17. I had seen the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I had seen half of the 80s version. I've had that DVD sitting on my shelf for years, the 80s BBC series. I started watching that show and I just realized, hey, you know what? I feel like I want to read the book before I finish this series. And yeah, it's taken me a long time to get to it. I can't remember what inspired me to get to it this year. I think it was just I was going through so much classic sci-fi. My main series for this year, To Your Scattered Bodies Go, The Stars, was all about classic sci-fi. And so I just figured, why not just throw this one on the list? It was also available as part of Spotify's premium listening service, where they provide 15 hours of audiobooks every month to people who pay the monthly fee. And so I saw that it was on there, and so I was like, hey, why not? Why not just give it a go in audio format? I believe it was read by Stephen Fry, if I remember correctly. And this book was a lot of fun. Of course, having seen both the film and most of that TV series, I knew the story here quite well. And both those were solid adaptations, but this book here, of course, has so much more packed into it. The emphasis on the humor feels stronger, and the quality of the jokes is just so consistent throughout that it just had me laughing a lot. And just smiling constantly. I've been enjoying a lot of British books this year, or last year, I should say. And there's that like kind of wry, subtle quality to the humor that even when they weren't doing big outright jokes, there was just light little touches of humor that just kept me smirking. I will admit that I did grow a bit tired of the quirkiness. Close to the end, I started to wear a little bit tired. But if I'd spread out the book a little bit more, I think I listened to it in about maybe 3 days all the way through. If I'd spread it out over a week, I probably wouldn't have grown as tired of some of the quirkiness as I did. But overall, this thing always won me back. It was just such a joy to go through, and I can't wait to continue into the next book, which I definitely will in 2025. Next one on my list was a return to my Alien series. This time I was listening to Alien, Enemy of My Enemy. This one I listened to because it was available on Audible Premium Plus service, which I had. I kept bouncing back and forth. I would turn it off for a while, and then I'd come back. And so the next book as well will be in the same grouping. But for Enemy of My Enemy, published in 2023, written by Mary Sangiovanni, I feel like I've done a disservice to this book, and I can't really give a full thoughts on it at the moment. I started this one unaware that it was actually the third part of this Colony War saga that was going on in the Alien books at that time, and still going today. They just recently published the fourth version, or the fourth part of that story. But yeah, the Colony War saga, it has a lot of continuity going on in it, and I spent the first maybe a quarter of this book confused. Like, oh, I feel like I'm missing out on so many details. Why is this book so cryptic and weird? And then I realized that, oh, it's because I didn't read the first two parts of it. So obviously that skews my rating for this one. I did continue to the end, but I'll say for this pass through all the inter-colony conflicts, and there was some ties to Prometheus, and which I'd seen in some of these previous Alien books as well, but this one had some strong ties. Those elements did not really sit well with me. I didn't enjoy them very much, but again, it could be because I wasn't steeped in the lore from the prior two books. There was some interesting intercompany politics going on in this one that I liked, and some of these settings of the alien threats were kind of cool. My favorite part of the book was actually this research center was on a moon that was slowly breaking apart, and so that gave this kind of ticking clock for the book. That was pretty cool, but yeah, there was a lot of stuff in here that just left me confused, left me uninterested, and I think a lot of that could be down to the fact that I was jumping into the third part of a series without realizing it. So I will return to this book once I get through those other two parts. The Colony War books, the other ones I don't believe were part of the Audible Plus plan, or else I probably would have gone to them right away. But those ones I probably just have to pick up the audiobook or maybe the physical book on my own time. But either way, I gave that one a 6.3. By the way, I gave Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy 7.7. So the next one on my list was also part of the Audible Premium Plus. This was Meg Primal Waters, published in 2004, written by Steve Alton. This was the third Meg book, and I liked that first book. I was hit or miss on the second book. In fact, mostly miss. But this third one brought me right back around. This was the strongest entry yet. All around, this thing is a big step up from the trench. And in several ways, even the first one, they do this 20-year time jump, and it gives a lot of room for the characters to grow and change and introduce some new problems and dynamics. I really liked all that stuff. This book also had this strong element of kind of like a commentary on reality TV, and some of that stuff I found fun. In fact, I really enjoyed that part of it. The weakest part of it was the villain, but even he wasn't very bad. He felt a little bit mustache twirly at times. But it's a kind of cheesy series, so that's okay. I love the ending for this one and the way it sets up the next book, Hell Aquarium. Oh man, it had me jumping out of my pants to get to that next book. I was so excited. Um, and I'm currently in the middle of that right now, of Hell Aquarium, and I'm really enjoying it. So that'll pop up on my next Flyin Solo book series next year. But yeah, I gave that one a 7.1. Meg Primal Waters. Yeah, read the first book. You can skip the second book. You can jump right into this one. I think you'll have a lot of fun, because I know I certainly did. Next book. This one I had been curious to read for a long time as a fan of the film Children of the Damned, and that is The Midwich Cuckoos, published in 1957, written by John Wyndham. John Wyndham, I had recently got into thanks to Eric. He recommended this Chalky series to me back in 2021. I watched all of that TV show, I read the book, and I was just got an interest in checking out some more of his books. And so when I saw this in a bookstore with a really cool cover, I love the cover that I have for this one, I just had to pick it up right away. This one I read almost entirely in print. Only the last two chapters I did in audio form, because I was so into reading it and I had to go to work, and I just couldn't bear to not finish it that day. And so I went, and it was available on Spotify at the time, and so I was like, screw it, I'll just listen to those last two chapters. I can't end this day without finding out how this thing ends. And yeah, it was just a really, really fun book. It had a lot of that same wry British touch to it that I enjoyed. It's a short book, has a great pace to it, has a very snappy kind of feel. The kickoff to the story, all the people in this small little town, Midwich, they all pass out, and when they wake up, some trouble is afoot. It takes place over the span of several years, and I think all the characters pop. Not necessarily like super strong characters, but they have a fun appeal to them. The kind of attention grabbing opener, I think, is really great. Really hooks you in, and the way that it unfolds throughout the rest of the story is a lot of fun as well. My favorite part of the book is just seeing how the town reacts to all this craziness. It's like this very small little boring town, then all of a sudden has this crazy thing occur, and it's really good. The horror of the main antagonists. I guess I already mentioned Children of the Damned, so you can probably tell that it's about some troubled kids. Yeah, they're pretty spooky. I think the only thing I didn't love about this was we have this one character who's like a science teacher, and he's got so many theories going on all the time. It's almost like the book stops for him to rattle off his hypothesis about what's going on or how to deal with it, and it'll pop in every now and again, and it does that. And the guy's just a slight bit obnoxious, and I wish that we hadn't spent quite as much time with his speeches, because it starts to slow the pace down a bit near the end. But overall, Midwich Cuckoos, strong recommend. By the way, if anyone's curious, I'll leave a link to my partner's Bookstagram, and I'll leave a link to the an image of this book, because I did publish a review on it on there, so you can see it. It's a great cover by the Modern Library. Next book is Fragment from 2009, written by Warren Fay. I think that's how you say his name. This book was another one that I found just because I was on such a high after Jurassic Park. I was kind of like, okay, what are some more kind of dinosaur books? What are some more books that have that kind of pace set on an island. I just love island settings. And Fragment came up, and I was like, sure, it doesn't really have very many reviews anywhere, but the concept sounds interesting. I'll check it out. And I like this book a lot. I went through it in audio form, and it had this really snappy pace. So I do wish that I'd gone through it in print because there was so much information. This is an extremely dense book, so much scientific backdrop for how this island is the way it is. To start, we follow this again, a reality TV crew, and they're kind of trying to do this trashy show, like, oh, there's this island, Hender's Island, and they're like, oh, we'll do a show about the discovery of this island that's like a mythic island, and they go there and they find this insane, extremely dangerous ecosystem where life and death, it all happens at such a rapid pace. Creatures are like born immediately reproducing because they get killed immediately after they're born, and it's just like this crazy death spiral. And anyone who goes there is killed instantly. And it leads to kind of a global concern of like, holy shit, this island, if any of this fauna manages to get off this island, if because once it's discovered on live TV, I think it was, it's kind of like the world is going crazy, like, oh, what are we going to do to get in here and explore and find out what the secret of this island is? But it's like, oh no, if anyone's irresponsible and anything gets off this, our whole global ecosystem could be fucked. And so it's got a great sense of like a ticking clock fear, like, oh, we gotta, figure out how to disrupt this ecosystem before anyone else gets to it and exploits it, especially for weapons. And so there's a lot of scientific information going on about why the ecosystem is the way that it is, why certain animals are built the way that they are. A lot of that stuff is very dense. I would have appreciated having the pages in front of me to be able to kind of hold some of that stuff a little bit better. But for what it was in this audio format, the pace of this thing is crazy, moves so fast, so much new information going on all the time. I like the characters, despite their kind of fairly thin quality, similar to Jurassic Park. But there was actually a romance here that I liked a lot. I thought that really worked. The human villain as well, I thought was quite cool and had an interesting background and motivation. He was like one of those scientists that will go out there and lie about climate change, for example, even though he knows that the stuff he's saying isn't true. It's just about having an ego, being the top of a certain field, even if it's like a fake field. As long as he can be on top, he's happy to do it. And he gets some pretty ominous ideas with this island. And I thought a lot of that stuff was really fun and maybe a little arch, but just a fun part of the plot. And yeah, they discovered some really interesting secrets about Hender's Island too that I thought was quite intriguing. Some of it I wasn't sure how to feel. Some of it I had to ruminate on a little bit more. Some of it kind of changed the way I felt about the book a little bit. But still, overall, a very fun read, a very quick pace to it, and one that you can just burn through really fast. But you might want to slow down because the science is so dense that it might do you good to take your time with it, unlike what I did. This one I gave a 6.9. 100% I'll return to this. 100% I want to track down a digital or physical copy for my next read because, yeah, a lot to unpack here. Next one that I did was called The Woman in the Dunes, published in 1962, written by famed Japanese author Kobo Abe. I hope I'm saying that name right. Now, this was a really curious little book. It's sort of like I don't know how to say it. Ebe's writing here reminds me a little bit of Kafka, especially when it comes to metamorphosis. This book almost feels like it's almost like a mirror to it in a way. It follows this guy who doesn't really have much going on in his life. I believe he was a teacher, but his real passion was entomology. And he has this, his dream is to discover a new type of beetle or some sort of insect that no one's ever seen before. That's kind of his whole passion in life and his whole, like, that'll be my legacy. And he goes to this weird little part of this desert in Japan, and he ends up getting himself into some, well, I guess to spoil just a smidge because you kind of have to. He gets himself imprisoned and stuck living with this strange woman, the woman in the dunes, as it were. And it's a fascinating little kind of meditation on oppression and how it warps someone's perspective. The book is extremely eccentric. All the characters are weird. The style is weird. Our lead character is weird. Everybody's just confusing and baffling. And a lot of that stuff makes you feel like you're constantly off your footing. Anytime you feel like you've got something figured out, the book throws something new at you, and you're kind of like, "Whoa, what? Now everything has changed." But in terms of like the metamorphosis, yeah, he's constantly seeing the worldview kind of shaped like an insect. I don't know how to fully describe it, but he's obsessed with them. He's always thinking about them, trying to capture them. It's kind of all he has. But like in the metamorphosis, he has no real control over his what's happening around him. He's just kind of shaped by all this mad world that he's fallen into. And our lead in his interactions with the titular woman were really something else. So strange and fascinating. And the futileness of this little world that they're living in, this place surrounded by sand, where the sand's always kind of cutting into them, cutting away from the world from them. It creates this really isolating and oppressive feel. And yeah, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's a lot to take in, a lot to process with this book, and I feel like I still need a little bit more time with it. And I'd love to come back for a second pass through. But yeah, The Woman in the Dunes, 1962. I'd give that one a pretty hearty recommend as well. I gave that a 6.9, but I feel like it's only going to grow the more I spend time with that book. And yeah, like I said, a good little double bill. It's a short book. You can read it in the Metamorphosis. In you could read them both in like 3 days or 4 days. I don't know, a week. And I think the two of them together, you'd really get a lot out of that pairing. Next is Alien into Charybdis, published in 2021 and written by Alex White. Previously, I mentioned his other book, Alien the Cold Forge. This one is kind of a sequel in a way and kind of not, kind of a standalone book that has some crossover characters. This one I was actually very hyped to get to. I had enjoyed the Cold Forge so much, and just the idea of Alex White coming back had me excited. And I managed to pick this thing up on Amazon, the hardcover version they had on sale for $8. And I was like, hey, I can't pass that up. I didn't own any of the other ones physically. I own quite a few as ebooks and audiobooks, but this was the first one that I was able to get physically. And still, I haven't been able to build that much of a collection, which is too bad. I'm always checking whenever I go to used bookstores or even just regular bookstores. I'm always looking, and they honestly don't have that much. But so, yeah, into Charybdis. This one actually was very close to taking over my second favorite slot. There's so much to like about this book. It's set on this small little, I think it's a mining colony, or maybe not quite mining, but either way, a colony that's having some issues. And the colony decide to bring in some cheap people to do the maintenance, to fix up some of their tech. And it's this American crew, and the colony themselves is run by an Iranian company. And so they have a lot of distrust for the Americans. The Americans have a lot of distrust for the Iranians. And there's a lot of kind of intergroup conflict going on that I found quite different for the Alien books so far, to have such kind of a grounded kind of intensity just between the political tension. I liked a lot of the characters early on. It took a long time before we really got to the aliens, and I wasn't even really missing them because I thought so much of the character interaction stuff was great on its own. There's lots of twists and turns in this book. Some of them, one of them was kind of such a shocking twist that I really didn't know what to think, and it took me a little while to kind of get over it and just to accept where the story was going after that point. But yeah, this one definitely is a great book. I'd give it a strong recommend. The alien threat when they appear are pretty intense. There's some new alien elements that they bring in, which I thought were cool and expanding on stuff from the Cold Forge in an exciting way, but wasn't fully sure to accept that either. Um, and just overall, I think this is one of the alien books that has the most depth out of what I've encountered so far. It could possibly be my second favorite after Aliens Phalanx. It may be better than my other favorite, DNA War. I'll have to think on it a little bit more, but definitely this one is one that I would give a solid recommend to and encourage anyone who's enjoyed any of the Alien books so far. This should be on your list, although you'll have to read the Cold Forge first, because there are some big ties. Oh, and like I said, I'd purchased it in hardcover. I read most of the book in hardcover, probably about 70%. And then it was kind of the same thing with my previous one, the Midwich Cuckoos, where some days I'd have to go to work, and I enjoyed it so much that I just couldn't bear to not continue. And so I was like, fuck it. But halfway through, because I had started a new job about halfway through this book, and so my reading time got diminished quite a bit. And so it was like, oh no, I got to go to work, but I don't want to stop reading. And so I picked up an audiobook and I finished the last maybe, 30%, half audio, half in print. Because I would just, listen to it at work, come home, read more, then read more the next day, then go to work. So yeah, that's how I finished this book. And I'll admit, I appreciated the reading in print more. I thought the narrator was okay, but because I had spent so much time in the book just in my head, hearing the voices, when it came to having someone else's interpretation, it was a little bit more disruptive than usual because of how long I'd spent with these characters. Because it's really not a short book either. It's about 550 pages, so it was a long time that I'd spent just with them on my own. But that one I gave a 7.7. Absolutely, just recommend that book. Next one on the list is the sequel to Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton's The Lost World, published in 1995. This one I read mostly in audio, but I did pick up a physical copy partway through listening to it, and I read a bit of it in print as well. This was my third time through this book. The first time I very much did not like it. Second time I was a bit more mixed. This was the first time through that I would say that I actually did enjoy it the whole way through. I still don't love some of the changes that they made. With Ian's character doesn't feel quite right in the fact that they rewrote his what happened with him at the end of Jurassic Park. The original book was a little bit odd, and they found a way to shoehorn these two kids into the book. I found those kids to be a bit annoying. They did not play as well as Lex and Tim in the first book. These two were just a little bit more obnoxious. And the villain that this time around, Dodgson, was I don't know, a bit too crass, a bit too sometimes over the top. Those are some of the things that really bothered me the first time around, is the shoehorning of the kids, Dodgson. And the book also takes a really interesting turn on expanding on some of the ideas from the first Jurassic Park book, which talked a lot about the fact that you can never really bring back these animals. What we've done is a facsimile. This kind of, it's almost all like a big deception what we've done, and to fool yourself into thinking that these are really dinosaurs. That's a big debate between Wu and John Hammond in that first book. This one expands on that in some really interesting ways, and it becomes kind of a study on the idea of extinction. And there's a lot of back and forth on, can we even learn anything about extinction on these animals? What does it mean to try to bring an animal back from extinction? What does that mean for the environment? What does that mean for us as a people? A lot of really interesting ideas there. And the book becomes almost kind of nihilistic in a way. And the island itself is very nihilistic. Some of it was actually making me think of Fragment, where it's just like the island is cannibalizing itself in a cool way. There was also this really cool chameleon dinosaur that appears near the end. That was a really creepy bit. I love that. That was some great bits of horror. And the actual kind of last page, the last interactions between all the characters, I thought really summed up and really put an interesting button on all the ideas. Almost kind of a what was even the point of us even discussing any of this at all? What was the point of me writing this book? It almost felt like with Michael Crichton, and it was really interesting and a strangely fitting and poignant note to end that book on. And yeah, I enjoyed a lot more this time. The Lost World, I would give it a recommend, but temper your expectations. If you love the first Jurassic Park book, this is a very different animal, and it deserves consideration in its own right, but it does take some resetting of expectations. Next book on my list is Carmilla, published in 1872 and written by Sheridan Le Fanu, I believe is how you say that. I'm not always the best with pronunciations. This one I read in a mix, mostly audio, but I did start with print for the first several chapters. This one I read because my partner just bought me the book. She was like, "Oh, you read Dracula earlier this year? I saw this novel, thought you might be interested," so she bought me a copy. This was a charming little gothic horror novel, but definitely a tale from a different era. Clearly, this was an influence on Dracula, but the flavor of vampires is quite different, and the emphasis on kind of the sexual nature of vampirism feels slightly notched up in this one. that element is there in Dracula, but it's played down a bit more. The short length of this novel feels like a help and a hindrance in one. There's a touch of the older text distance that sometimes comes from stories written over 100 years ago. So having the shorter length at least means that has less of a chance to kind of drag or pull me down a bit. Because sometimes if you read a book, published in the 1800s, late 1800s, or early 1800s, they can definitely start to drag and feel a little bit like they're just built for a different pacing. Not always, of course, but you can definitely feel that sometimes. So having that shorter length, yeah, definitely helps. But it also feels like the story could have had a bit more happen in the time that they had. Carmilla is definitely a very kind of it's a story about kind of just sitting with the moments between these characters, Carmilla and our lead character. Spoilers a bit for a book, again, over 100 years old. There's a semi-sapphic romance element to this book, and the seduction of our lead by Carmilla takes up a large amount of this book. And that stuff I thought was quite interesting, and it worked. There were some good creepy moments here or there, but I did feel like the book ended a bit too abruptly, and because of its short length, I felt like I didn't get quite as much material there that I really wanted. I feel like there was some more avenues for depth that they could have gone to, and then just didn't really quite get there. But still, quite enjoyable old school vampire gothic novel. I'd give this one a solid recommend, but not a strong one, and I rated it 7.1. Next on my list is The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, published in 1927, written by famed horror author H.P. Lovecraft. This one was just great. This one I did in audio. I was coming to it for a first time, and yeah, I just all around love this thing. Lovecraft's style feels a bit more fresh here and free in some ways. Sometimes I feel like he confines himself within the epistolary fiction, and sometimes the boundaries of that can be a bit too restrictive. Sometimes it works just great, but sometimes it does feel a bit too restrictive. This one has a much wider scope to it, and I love the fantasy setting of this dreamland and how much this works to tie this story into various other stories and characters to make this place feel like it's somewhere that I've lived in for years, even though this is my first time experiencing this story. This kind of dream cycle, it filters into a lot of H.P. Lovecraft's work. This kind of shared dreamland and how that influences certain characters. I hadn't read this book previously, but I have read other ones with Randolph Carter in it. So that was kind of cool getting a bigger kind of story for him. And his goal has a kind of tantalizing pull that keeps you waiting to get to where he's going, and I found that quite gripping. They also bring in some of the foes that we've seen prior. I won't spoil too much of that, but some of that stuff was quite cool as well, and how it kind of fleshed out some more of what those foes are or what they could be. And some of the imagery in this book is just overall just big and expansive and beautiful. I love that. Overall, great little novella. I would strongly recommend this thing. It's not that long. I think it was 4 hours in audio. It's maybe like 70 pages, I think, in print. Something like that. Not too many pages. But overall, one of the ones that I would strongly recommend from Lovecraft's longer works. This thing is great. Maybe not up there with something like At the Mountains of Madness or Call of Cthulhu, but I think I like this more than Dunwich Horror. And yeah, definitely a really cool piece of fiction. Gave that one a 7.4. Definitely check that out. The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. All right, this next one I won't go into too much because this is yet again a book that me and Brianna have already covered. This was for the Mona Awad book Bunny, published in 2019. This one I did mostly in audio, but also some print as well. And this was just a fun book. Like I said, I won't say too much because we've already covered it much more fully than I could do here in this brief little thing. But I'll say I just loved how kind of quirky and weird this book was. Very weird. It's a little like a horror book, but it's got a touch more humor to it. It goes to all sorts of strange and funny places. Mona Awad has this kind of distinctive pattern and flow to her writing, and this one shares a lot of that similar kind of flair as Rouge, and both of them I really like her style. The story itself is interesting. It goes, like I said, to some weird places, but I was always intrigued. I was always excited to see where it was going to go next. And just overall, I had a lot of fun with this one. Some lovely bits of dialogue and simile. And yeah, Mona Awad's flair as a writer is what really makes this one stand out so much. And yeah, like this one a lot. Gave it a 7.4. Next one is another novella. This one written by Stephen King, published in 2008, and this is N. This one I did in audio form. I don't think it's ever come up on the podcast, but I have a little display shelf in my podcasting room or my movie room, and I always display a movie and I always display a comic. And I just, every now and again, whenever I'm in this room, if there's one that's been there for a few days, I'll switch it out to a new one. And I switched out my comic adaptation of N, published by Marvel Comics back when Marvel was doing a whole bunch of Stephen King stuff. They were doing The Dark Tower, they did The Stand, and I was really into that stuff at that time, and I still have a lot of those books. That comic was published in 2010, and I'd read it several times through. I'd even watched this little kind of, I don't know what they call them when it's like a comic that's done to narration and I guess, I don't know, I think it's motion comic. I think that's what it's called. But either way, so I was a big fan of that, but I'd never actually gone to the source material. And once I pulled that out and it was on my display shelf, I was like, oh man, I really want to read N. And I was at work and I was just on my break and I was kind of like, I wonder if N is available anywhere in Audible or Spotify. And it was available on Audible. And so I was just like, screw it, I'll just listen to this at work today. Why not? And boy, did it not disappoint. It's one of my favorite pieces of fiction that I went through last year. Absolutely, this is on the tops. I even was considering it as one of my favorite books of the year, but I just decided to go with My Sweet Audrina because overall I think it was a more fulfilling experience. But just as a short little bit of horror, man, does this thing pack a punch. The comic itself was quite horrifying, but it gets even more disturbing in this novella. And it's one of my favorite pieces of King short fiction that I've ever read or listened to. And it's also Stephen King has a long tradition of very much Lovecraft inspired stories, and I think that this is one of his strongest of his Lovecraftian tales. It's told in epistolary style, like many of them are, very fitting for Lovecraft. And the concepts themselves are so Lovecraft; they're so cosmic and horrifying, and it has that same thing where there's forces out there that if humanity peek into them, it can break their psyche. And in the case of this story, the character of N, because the epistolary style is written by a psychiatrist who gets this patient that they call N, and they're kind of going through it. First, they're just kind of, it's basically their notes from their experience with the therapy. And N is obsessed with counting things. He feels like he has to count in order to keep something from escaping from somewhere, and it's all centered around this field that he just stumbled upon. He was just in his old hometown, went to this field, and there was these rocks there, and he went out to see the rocks, and he was taking some photos of them, and as he was taking the photos, he noticed that in the camera lens there was a rock there that he couldn't see with his naked eye. But then he began to see with his naked eye, and he started counting them over and over again to confirm it has to be this number. And he knew that if it wasn't the right number, then something would get out. Even just telling you guys this plot is giving me the goosebumps because it's reminding me of how horrifying this story is. Really, it creeps into you. This thing is one of the scariest novellas I've read, and up there with some of the scariest books I've read in general. There's such a distinctive pattern to the way it's written as well, similar to the Mona Awad, like I was saying before, because Anne is obsessed with patterns. He's obsessed with counting things. He has all these kind of weird, kooky phrases that he says, and they'll just get stuck in my head, and I was thinking of them for ages. The counting tick itself becomes addictive as you're reading it, or in my case, listening to it. And I noticed myself doing it afterwards. I was thinking of things that he would count, and I noticed that I was counting them myself. And it's a story that stuck with me still sticks with me. I mean, again, 2010 is when I picked up this comic. And every now and again, I think about it and I come back to it. And I'm so happy to have finally come back to the source material itself, King's novella. I gave this one a 9.5. Absolutely adore it. And yeah, one of the strongest recommends I could give to N. Next one, and we're coming close to the end at this point, is my second from last Alien book on this list. This one was Alien Echo published in 2019, written by Mira Grant. This is quite an odd turn for the Alien series, and I was actually very hesitant about this book for a long time. This was the first and only at this point Alien novel that is aimed at a young adult audience. This is a YA book. Um, this one I read in print. It is not available in audiobook format, at least right now. There is an audiobook out there. It's just not available anywhere. I'm not sure why that is. But so I was like, okay, I'll pick it up in print and I'll go through it in that way. And I had some struggles with this book. It took me a while to get through it. And I was actually expecting it to be my last book of 2024 because it took me so long. And part of that was the chapters before the aliens' arrival were quite plotting. They're mostly just teen romance stuff, teen angst stuff, and a lot of it felt repetitive. This story was told in first-person perspective, one of the only books in this of the books I went through in 2024 to be first person. I'm just generally not a fan of that, and when I see stories written in that style, I tend to avoid them. And this story presented a lot of the reasons why. One, it gets repetitive. You hear the characters saying so many of the same phrases over and over again. And in particular, this character had a certain kind of slang to them where they would always say things are prime or subprime. I just got so sick of hearing that. And just the fact of being stuck in one character's head, it can, just having that one particular voice guiding everything can kind of make things feel a little bit stale after a while. I feel like when you have third person omniscient narrator, you can have a little bit of a more neutral tone, but when you're specifically in someone's head experiencing everything through their point of view, I just feel like I'm a bit too close to things. And if I don't like the character that I'm with, it's very easy for me to just struggle to get through it. And so I did it. It took me longer than normal to get through this book. It was maybe, I don't know, like 3 months. And it's not even a very long book, so that's a long time for me. Um, there was a lot of good descriptions here. I'm not going to knock the author, Amir Grant. I think that she was doing some good stuff. It's just stylistically not my favorite point of view. I'm not really a reader of YA novels, and so just readjusting to some of that kind of angst that a lot of them have was a bit of a struggle for me. But there were some good descriptions. I loved the planet that they were on. I thought that a lot of that stuff was cool, and it centers on these twin sisters, and there was kind of an interesting take between them, and I liked a lot of that stuff once we got in past all the angst and got to some of the more interesting plot stuff. I liked that. And once the aliens showed up, they did feel a slight bit played down, maybe even a little bit neutered. Most of the kind of nastier bits tend to happen off the page, but still I thought there was some decent aliens horror stuff here. I wish it was a little bit stronger because it took so long to get to it that I wish that we'd had a little bit more intensity with them. But before we got it was decent. And overall, I'd say that this book was a mixed bag for me, but once the aliens did show up, it was enough to get me a little bit more leaning to the positive. Still one of the weaker ones I went through this year, but definitely not at the bottom of the list. This one I gave a 6.3. Next in line, as I get to my penultimate two entries in this book list, we have the last entry from the Thrawn Trilogy. This one was Star Wars The Last Command, published in 1992, written by Timothy Zahn. Wow, the final book in the Thrawn Trilogy ramps things up on the intrigue with some of the different players we've had going along. We have some smugglers in there. We have some Imperials in there. We have some founding of the New Republic. A lot of that stuff coming together in really cool ways. Thrawn becomes only one of the villainous players that is really at the forefront in this book. There's another one in there that I really like the direction that they've taken. I've liked that character throughout this trilogy, but he's always been a little bit more of a background player. Now he takes more the center stage, and it's almost a shame because Thrawn, like, he is more played down in this one, certainly, to the point where he almost gets pushed aside at the end of the trilogy. Even still, I love the role that Thrawn plays. I love the role that the Empire takes in this last book. All the characters I feel like come together in a good conclusion while still leaving open a lot of space for further adventures for everybody, which of course they went on to do. I feel like everything progressed really smoothly and came to a satisfying conclusion, which is always nice to see at the end of a trilogy. And after I finished it, I had such an appetite that I was like, yeah, 2025. I always said I was only going to dip my foot in a little bit and I was never going to go in too far. After finishing it this second time around, I was like, well, maybe I was a little too hasty. Maybe it's time to start putting the whole leg in. And so I picked up a copy of the Truce Bakura. I was going to listen to an audiobook version of that too. I almost bought it even until I looked and saw that it was only an abridged version of that book. There is no complete audiobook. So I just picked up an old paperback, and that's what I've been going through. But I'm about 70 pages into that book at the moment, and yeah, I'm quite enjoying it. It's definitely a little bit different, but I guess I shouldn't go into it too much. That's for next year's entry. Either way, The Last Command, great end to the trilogy, whetted my appetite for even more Star Wars books, and yeah, they have me hooked at this point. And I gave that one a 7.7. Really strong stuff, and overall, just a great trilogy. And I strongly recommend all three of those books, especially if you like Star Wars. And the audiobook form is great. Now that I'm reading the Truce Bakura in print, it does make me curious when the next time I return to this trilogy to read it that way. But I do think that this audiobook itself is a strong recommend. Mark Thompson does such a good job. They have a whole production going on too. It's not just him and his great impressions, but they also have lots of moments of the classic score coming in at certain points. During some of the battles, they'll have like blaster fire, or some of the ship to ship action will also have that. Really good, really immersive stuff. A very strong audiobook, one of the best audiobook productions that I've seen. So strong recommend on that as well. Last on my list is kind of an auspicious one. It's yet again another Aliens book. This one was actually published in 2024. This was Alien Uncivil War. As I already mentioned, the year 2024 was when it was published, and it was written by Brendan Deenan. This was actually a book that I was very much looking forward to. I knew it was coming out probably, I don't know, pretty early into the year. I knew this one was coming out, and so I was getting hyped for it as I was reading all these other books, and like, oh man, can't wait for this one to come out. And I had a little bit of struggles with this one. First thing I'll say is I did listen to it in audiobook form again, and that turned out to be a mistake because me and the narrator for this book did not get along well. The story followed this dad and his three kids. It started the big climax of another story, and then it kind of settled down and ramped up into a different one. And this dad and his two daughters, the voice that the narrator had for the two daughters was just so grating. I kept wishing, like, oh man, I wish I had not bought this audiobook. I wish I had just bought the paperback or even a digital copy. I wish that I'd not gone with audio. So again, I'll say if you're going to check out this book, avoid the audiobook. I wish I had. And I will say, I will try to return to this one. I'm probably just going to reread all these books at some point. Yeah, so that was a bit of a barrier. But not just that. There was some textual issues as well. I tried to do my best to separate the annoying narrator and just focus on, okay, just listen to the words. What are they saying? And one of the bigger issues that I found in this story itself was just that I found the lead to be quite unlikable. And this is a issue that I often have with military characters, where they can just be kind of bland, and it's just kind of like, okay, their military aspect is what makes them interesting. That's one of my usual issues. Sometimes with military characters, you get another issue of mine, which is that they're just kind of an embodiment of all the toxic traits of super masculine kind of men. Toxic masculine, I guess you could say. This guy, he has a very short fuse of a temper. He's very kind of, oh, you said something to me that I didn't like. Well, I'm going to get into your face. Maybe I'll throw a few punches for really no reason. It's like, whoa, that was just like some asshole saying a snide comment. Did you really have to blow up and beat everybody up? And it's always going on about how he's like, oh, he's so well trained and he can take anyone down. But it's like, these are just random, because he ends up landing on this planet and trying to establish himself in this kind of mining colony. Like, these are just like asshole miners in a bar. Do you really have to like start a bar fight and just destroy everybody? And then he walks away being like, oh, I really need to get control of my temper. Until the next time someone says this, and he's doing the same thing. And it was just, I was never on his side, really. Sure, he loved his kids, but he was just kind of an angry, like, asshole. And so I didn't really enjoy spending time with him too much. And I'll say what I just said, that pattern of him doing that, it literally happens almost every chapter of, oh, here's a new situation. Oh, you said something that I didn't like. Oh, I'm going to grab your collar and get up in your face. It's like, whoa, dude, do you have to be such a rageaholic? What's wrong with this guy? The kids are kind of annoying too. They're always kind of at his heels, and they don't ever feel like they really have too many like actual characteristics. They're just kind of the, oh, daddy, we love you. Oh, daddy, calm down. But they never feel like they have a real point in the story besides just being victims for the dad to save with this big tough guy act all the time. Some of the way that the story progressed and the way that the characters interacted had a YA feel to it, even though this book is not YA. The language, the violence was all stronger than you would see in that kind of book. But just the way the story was told kind of felt like a YA book. And so that was also a bit off-putting, especially coming off of Alien Echo, which I'd finished maybe like 2 or 3 weeks before I started this book. So that wasn't too great. There's some mystery stuff going on in there. That was kind of interesting, kind of intriguing, but I was never really that pulled in. It developed okay, and I kind of liked where it ended up in the conclusion. But yeah, a lot of the elements just never really came together super well. Some of the alien horror stuff was good, but I feel like they spaced it out way too long. They introduced the alien plot relatively early, but it felt like it took until maybe the last, I don't know, last 2 hours before it really became like a big part of the story. All the rest of it was all just kind of intrigue going on. And I was like, wow, what were the aliens doing all this time? Were they just kind of creeping around the corners, looking in, like, oh, when are we going to attack? Oh, wait, it's not time yet. We got to wait to the climax. And I was like, what's going on here? So, again, I would like to see what I think reading this in print, not having to deal with that narrator, maybe having some tempered expectations, because, like I said, I was very excited for this book, but it ended up just being a mediocre one for me. I gave it a 5.9. And so it's kind of ending off the year in a little bit of a whimper. But overall, this year, so many fantastic books. I've already highlighted some of my favorites on my sweet Audrina. Coming around, finishing some books that have been on my bookshelf for years. I hope I mentioned that in one of the previous parts. That was kind of one of my goals for this, my casual reading of 2024, was to just look around my bookshelf and pick out some ones that I really felt had been sitting for too long and I needed to get to. So that was nice, and to return to some books that I really enjoyed, or books that I didn't necessarily enjoy, but then found new appreciation. Something like The Lost World. Um, I was really glad to return to that again for a third time and find something more in it than I'd seen previously. So, yeah, overall, lots of books. I hope you guys, I hope it piques some interest for some of them. And yeah, I'm already, I think, 10 books in to my list of this year. I've already finished 10 books, and I can't wait to talk about some of those ones when I get to my next year's discussion of them. But until then, I hope you've enjoyed this series. I know I've enjoyed kind of thinking about these books again, and definitely have added some of them to my reread list for either 2025 or 2026. And yeah, just appreciate sharing some love for books. I hope that you guys keep reading in 2025. And if you have some standout favorites, yeah, maybe shoot us an email or reach out to me on Twitter. Be happy to hear what you guys are reading and what you'd like to recommend for me to read. I'm always open to suggestions. And yeah, thanks for listening to this, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.